I remember when we first met at art school
Yes.
doing painting and we talked about film
Constantly.
quite a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess it seems quite a natural thing for you to go into film.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think with your video pieces is that they look very much like they've come from film, a tradition of filmmaking, and not so much video art making.
Yeah, because I'm not really into the performative video art style of working. Well, I don't perform myself, and I'm.
Oh, you've done a little bit of acting.
When?
In Sleep Paralysis.
Oh, in Sleep Paralysis, yeah, it's my eyes.
Yeah.
You only see my eyes.
But it's the quality, the visual quality of the work is very much
Cinematic.
like film.
Yeah, I work on that quite hard to get that look. I really don't like the raw video, 25 frames per second. You know, it's very much like the way the human eye scans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit too real. So I try and get it back to a more cinematic, that 24 frames per second look, which is more fantastical.
Yeah, it's a bit like you have to make it fictitious before you can lose yourself in something, can't you? You can't really lose yourself. You can't immerse yourself in something that's too real.
It's interesting actually, because I've been looking at, I don't know if you've seen any of the new Blu-ray films.
No.
I saw a Blu-ray film the other day and I couldn't do the suspension of disbelief. The whole time I was looking at, you know, this is like an animation or
too many blackheads on the actors' noses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's way too real. So.
But just to go back to Sleep Paralysis, I mean, that's very much like a film, very much a slightly surreal sort of film. It reminds me a bit of Maya Dern's Meshes of the Afternoon, which is also a film about a dream. I think that was made in the 30s or the 40s.
Yes.
But it's also got it owes a debt to horror film.
Yes.
When you say. And sleep paralysis is something I've experienced from time to time, and it is a terrifying.
It's terrifying.
A terrifying feeling of being dreaming but awake at the same time and not being able to move.
Well, that particular piece came from an episode of sleep paralysis that I had where I woke up and I was completely paralysed, as you are in that in sleep paralysis, and I kept thinking that my eyes were open and I could see the whole room. And wallpaper was peeling off the walls, and flies were in the room. So it's actually a reenactment of the experience that I had,
right? Which
was absolutely terrifying, and it lasted for about 3 days after I went through it. It felt like the world had shifted a little bit.
Right.
It was horrible, actually. But yeah, it is a reenactment
because it's a very atmospheric piece, and it's a very. It doesn't really have a narrative, but it has. It seems to have a starting point somewhere before the film starts and an ending point somewhere after. So you are on a bit of a timeline.
Yeah, I like to call them anxious loops.
Right.
My work, in all of the works, I think it's an anxious loop. There's no resolution. It's sort of the anxiety builds, then it goes back to the beginning. And so hopefully for the viewer as well, you get that anxiety coming through. And they're quite short. So I don't want you to, relax at any point. Yeah.
The other thing with it is the first time I saw it was in a little theaterette, I think, at Acme, when it was shown during that talk.
So you missed the install.
I think. Oh no, I did see the install.
You saw it
of course.
at Spaceman?
No, that's right. I saw it the first time. I saw it in a gallery. Yeah. And when you see video art, or when I see video art in gallery, I find when you walk into a room and it's on, it's very easy to walk out sometimes.
I actually do the same thing.
If you don't give it time. But sometimes that's right, the second time I saw it, I was sitting in a little theaterette.
Yeah.
And it was much more of a film experience.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd like to know why you want to make these things for art galleries,
rather than
as short films.
That's a good question.
Because they've got everything about it. They've got the production value of a film.
Sort of, yeah, but in a sense, again, they don't have that straight narrative. They've got they're a little bit more disjointed, I think, sleep paralysis is quite, how would you say? It has a narrative, but it's not, as I said before, resolved or...
It's the middle with the beginning and end taken out.
Yeah.
I guess, is it that you see moments in film and you just want to kind of lose yourself in that moment?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm not interested in having a whole theatre of people sitting and watching. I want people to be able to walk in and out of it. And also I have other elements in the space. So with sleep paralysis, I had a series of drawings that went with it. So I want it to be a complete experience rather than just sitting watching a screen.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Also with the All Flesh is Grass, you know, where I built, you know, that enormous fence around in my space. I wanted you to experience, in a way, what I'd experienced, I guess, filming it as well. So I was sort of relocating the actual location into the gallery to a degree and just reconfiguring it. Do
you want the viewer to feel like they're almost a part of the film?
Almost, yeah, to immerse themselves in it, yeah. So that's why.
Yeah, All Flesh is Grass is a slightly creepy film too, isn't it?
Yes, I think most of mine are quite creepy.
It kind of almost looks like a suicide kind of thing, but then he doesn't really look like he's dead either at the end.
No, but it is sort of about that journey towards death, I suppose, and you know, again, sleep, death. You know, at what point.
There's all those nice little kind of archetypal things in there too, like the birds. You know, birds are associated with the soul and with angels and things like that.
I like the idea of the psychopomp, where I think sparrows lead you to the next world.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So.
But also all the little grass seeds that float off in the end too. It's a bit like the world's disintegrating, or his consciousness is disintegrating or something.
Well, I guess that's where the title came from as well. All Flesh is Grass. It's that idea of, you know, you come from the earth, you go back to the earth. So in that shot with the grass coming over the camera, or it's meant to be sort of over his body, I guess. Right. So he's being ingested back in. Which is something I'm interested in because I don't believe in heaven and God. But I do very much love the idea of going back into the earth and becoming a part of it again. So that's my only sort of spiritual side, I guess, is to connect with nature in that way.
Right.
And become part of it. I think that's much more exciting
than
heaven. Yeah, me too. I know. Sorry, it sounded a bit.
What sort of films do you think have fed into your work?
Oh, there's so many. A lot of B-grade film actually inform my work, and I think B-grade's an interesting term in itself because a lot of the great a lot of the progression that's been made in cinema, different ways of using cameras and all that sort of thing, has come out of a B-grade scenario because it's been directors who've had the freedom to just pick a camera up and, you know, do nutty things with it. So to me, I started off when I was about 9 years old, I think it was, and I saw Halloween for the first time. And I was fascinated by the fact that you saw it from Michael Myers' point of view. I was about 9 and then I just became addicted to watching a lot of horror and then I started looking at...
That's pretty early to watch horror.
Yeah, I know.
I was well into my teens before I stopped being scared of horror films.
I don't get scared anymore, but I think it warped my mind a bit. You know, it really kind of changed the way I looked at things. And
that's very important, I think. To have something in your childhood that warps your mind.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
And the Coen brothers too, working with Sam Raimi on those Evil Dead films.
Yes.
With all their, they came up with a whole lot of cameras on planks kind of.
Well, they had another one where they had a rope attached to the camera and they'd run with the rope, you know, where they're going through the woods in Evil Dead. So they're holding onto the rope on either side. There's two people and they just run with the camera and you get that crazy... The camera actually spins, I think, at certain points.
Right.
So, yeah, little things like that where it's sort of out of necessity.
It's always low budget, isn't it? It's people, it's necessity being the mother of invention.
Exactly, yeah. And that's how I make my work now. It's
So what sort of things have you had to invent?
What have I invented with camera? Not so... I've made some pretty dodgy sets, you know, the sleep paralysis, because I couldn't actually go behind walls and do things like that. I had to build or I just had big sheets of plasterboard that I'd made a hole. Actually, if my landlord's watching, it's not such a good thing, but I'd made a hole in the wall of my apartment. And it was a crack that was already there, and I was fascinated by this crack. And so I kept widening it, and it ended up making that hole. And then to get the shots I needed, I had to recreate that hole much larger to get the flies to go in and out, the ivy to go in and out, and I had to be able to walk around it. So little things like that, I guess. But in terms of camera technique...
well, I guess maybe not camera technique, but it's about problem solving. I guess all art or film would be about problem solving.
Always. And that's the part I love in the editing, I guess, too.
Yeah, that's and one of the really interesting things in that is that bit that looks like time-lapse of ivy
the ivy growing, which people actually said, "Oh, how did you grow it? How did you film it?"
But of course, that's a trick that you came up with.
It's just me standing behind the board, pulling it back through, and then in the editing, I just reverse it, so it looks like it's growing out. So yeah.
So it's about making the magical experience that all good art is, isn't it?
Well, I mean, in that piece too, the most magical bit for me was actually breeding the flies. So, because I had this idea. How did you do that? Well, I had this idea that I wanted at least 600 flies. So I went out to Epping to the bait shop and bought tubs of maggots, which maggots to me are the most horrific. And always in films, you know, I can watch a horror film, watch all the gore. Yeah.
The maggots on the chicken drumstick.
Suspiria. Oh, God. Or Suspiria, yeah. So... for me, I actually went a little bit mad making that piece, and I locked myself in my apartment for 2 weeks to make it. So I had the maggots. Well, the first experience, I'll go through it because it was pretty horrific. The first experience I had was I thought, I'll put them in a garbage bin. They can't climb out, you know. And then I had them in the second bedroom, which was my studio at the time. I had them on top of a wardrobe, and I'd left them overnight in there, eating their wheat bix, which is what I decided they were going to be vegetarian maggots, not eating meat because the smell would have been horrific. And I'd left them on this wardrobe, and I woke up in the morning and they'd all escaped and was starting to migrate across the floor in the carpet, and I had sort of shag pile carpet. So they'd started migrating to get under a wardrobe so they could pupate.
Right.
Which I didn't know at the time what the life cycle was. I just thought they were coming to get me, you know. And I had to pick every single one up with a spoon and put it back in the bin, which I was nearly retching. And that's when I went slightly mad because you think they're on you, you know, you get that classic.
Yeah. You needed someone else making a film about you making
film. Yeah, exactly. It was so horrific. So I got wise. And the second time I started to breed them, I took them outside. And they're actually a lot warmer out there anyway. And so... one day I went out.
So why did you?
Pupated.
You needed a lot of flies.
I needed a lot of flies to get the shots. The first time I tried to make the piece, I'd gone to Spaceman and whacked a fly over the head with a bit of 2x4. Took him home, nearly killed him. I only had one fly to work with.
Must have been a big fly.
He was a huge fly. He was a sarcophagus fly, which are the ones that actually feed on dead bodies.
Right.
So I'd done my research, and he was wonderful. And you know, I got him drunk on milk and sugar to get him to do what I wanted him to do. Put him in the fridge
because of the flies in sleep paralysis.
Yes.
The acting is superb.
Oh, it's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah.
You get fantastic close up. Really close. Did you take those close ups?
Yes. I had to learn how to wrangle flies, and I did my research through looking at Dario Argento's Suspiria Phenomena. Sorry, Phenomena, because he used thousands of flies and all that sort of stuff to get the shots. And so I learnt how to wrangle them. So you can actually make them. I don't actually think of a lasso around their neck. But I learnt how to get them to crawl on my palm, and because they were all just living free in my house with 600 flies for that 2 weeks or 10 days.